Welcome to Scaling the Well, the podcast to elevate your view.
Hello, this is Brian P., and welcome to Scaling the Well. Be sure to follow me at scalingthewell.com, Scaling the Well Podcast on Instagram, and Scaling the Well on Facebook. And I think I'm Scaling the Well on Twitter. I haven't kept up with Twitter too much, but I'm on there as well. So I just got back from speaking at the Unitarian Universalist Church up in the high desert in the great city of Apple Valley. And I was speaking on insecurities. So I thought I would just give the rest of my listeners a little taste of what I was talking about. This was more of a philosophical conversation. There's some good people up there, by the way. And my mom started the church, so I really had no choice but to go up there and speak. I love my mom. But yeah, it was a good experience. And if you guys are out in the high desert area, I encourage you to check them out. They have services every Sunday at 10 a.m. So basically, this thing on insecurities, I know we use the word a lot, in the English lexicon, and it's usually to describe, well, not to describe, but it's usually used in the context of teenagers and kids becoming of age and people who are insecure and how can people achieve their goals and overcome their insecurities. First of all, I would like to say that insecurities are a necessity. It's part of life. It's part of our DNA for a reason. If without insecurities, you basically wouldn't prepare for anything. It tells you to get ready. It's basically kind of related to fight or flight in that sense, but it's one of our basic instincts, from our lizard brains or whatever. And yeah, we need it. Now, the question is, as society evolves, just like fight or flight, right? We see road rage. We see a lot more street fights because we've become so stimulated. Do these old instincts become destructive? And insecurities have. Insecurities have caused people to quit jobs, caused people to keep from going for jobs. And then when you take into account technology, we have automobiles, you're stuck on the freeway, like I said, with road rage or social media. And then just kind of the social stratification that we have in our society with race, with gender, with sexual orientation. There's a lot of things that people can be insecure about. And these insecurities, for one, on a very individual level, can inhibit potential and goal setting, or at least obtaining your goals. But on a world level, it's possible, well, not possible, but people do, there are predators out there, and some are intentional and some are not, but they take advantage of our insecurities that are ingrained within us. One person in the congregation today said, our insecurities are inflamed. And this is done, in a variety of different ways. So that's kind of what I was getting at. It's more of the philosophical side of not just that insecurities are bad and don't be insecure. I mean, I think that's very basic. I like to always dig a little deeper than that. But first, let's start off with is what are insecurities? Well, I've basically come up with, I don't think I'm the only one who's come up with this, but I try to break it down to where, you can put it on a bumper sticker pretty much. And without getting too clinical, insecurities are a combination of two things. It is the fear of the unknown, and then the fear of you not being enough to deal with that unknown. Whatever that unknown is, whatever those mysteries are ahead of you, you're not equipped to deal with it, or you're not good enough. And that's really what an insecurity is. It's a subset of fear, but it's basically not thinking you're ready. Now, to follow up on the podcast I did on confidence, how does insecurity relate, versus confidence? Well, as I said before, confidence and arrogance are two different things. And confidence is going forward and overcoming a fear to achieve a goal because you believe in yourself, but you believe in yourself for good, tangible, sometimes quantifiable reasons. So if you take promotion, for example, and you've done that job before, and you have experienced, a lot of experience in that industry, whatever, well then, yeah, you have a right to feel confident that you could take on this new position, even though there's still a lot of unknowns. You don't know how your supervisor is going to be. You don't know the environment in which you're entering. It's going to be different than the environment that you're currently in. So there's still a lot of unknowns. There's still a lot of reasons to be insecure. And then on top of that, like I said, there's societal issues. Let's say you are a minority. Let's say you're African American, and you feel, and this feeling comes from past truths, that you're not going to be given as much consideration as somebody of a different ethnicity, or if you're a woman. These things are true, but there are also insecurities, and you're assuming that the person who's interviewing you, or that your new boss, let's say you already got the promotion, will have some of these negative thoughts towards you, and that may or may not be true, but the confidence will allow you to move forward anyway. Arrogance would be you have no proof that you can do the job. I think I can be a brain surgeon, so I'm just going to apply to be one, and I should get it because I'm just great, I'm just great at being human, and that would be arrogance, And this really isn't about that, but I just wanted people to know the difference, reiterate the difference between confidence and arrogance. But an insecurity is the antithesis to confidence. And it's anti-confidence in a way that it erodes, even if you do have the ability and the knowledge to go forward. And this isn't just, for jobs, but this could be for relationships, this could be, just financial planning, if you want to plan to buy a new home, it can erode at you. If you don't come from an environment that, no one else in your family has been able to afford a house, or nobody in your family has ever graduated college, or nobody in your family, your friends, has ever, joined the military and been successful, well, then, yeah, there's a lot of reasons that you would feel insecure, but you might have even more reasons to feel confident, and you ignore those, and that's how insecurity can harm you as an individual. How it plays out on a global scale. Well, first, let me get back to my own, studies of insecurity. So there was a philosopher named Alan Watts, and he was born in Britain in 1915, and he moved to the United States. And in, I believe it was 1951, he published a book called The Wisdom of Insecurity. And he's a philosopher, and basically what he's best known for is bringing more Eastern Buddhist philosophy to the West. He has a lot of talks. You can even find some of his talks that are still recorded on YouTube. What's the great thing about technology. And he had a lot of different opinions, and I'm not saying I agreed with all of them, but he was a very deep thinker. I encourage you to check him out. He passed away in 1973. But one of his things is that after World War II, a lot of the Western world had moved away from what were predominantly religious cultures and moved into more of a consumer culture. So what he was saying is that, and as I described insecurity before, is the fear of the unknown, and are we good enough to deal with the unknown? Religion gives you certainty, right? If you are part, and it doesn't really matter what religion, if you're Catholic, Jewish, Protestant, Lutheran, any of them, Islam, but basically it's a roadmap of, or a manual as to how to live your life and how you will do in the afterlife if you do so. So that provides a great amount of certainty, not just in this world, but in the next. And if you believe in that. So there's less anxiety, and I give it to people. I know plenty of people who are very religious, and sometimes I do envy them because I'm not, but they do have a calmness. I'm stressing out when I'm at work, and there's all these people and people with these high expectations, and you're just like trying to deal with stuff, and it can be stressful, and that's what I think millions of us feel. But at the same time, if you kind of feel like, well, hey, the important stuff, which is in this holy book, I am following, and that is what's going to determine my ultimate salvation, not, somebody in a suit sitting in a corner office. Well, that's pretty relaxing. That's pretty reassuring. And so your insecurities, you put everything in God's hands, right? If I don't get the promotion, it wasn't meant to be. That's pretty good, So I can understand why religion is very attractive. But what he was saying, Watts, was that after World War II, we had this, America became this great superpower, and the Allies became, superpowers kind of in conjunction. And that religion got replaced with that whole attitude of keeping up with the Joneses. And so we started purchasing more things, and it became more about conformity in the sense of that 1950s era, the archetype that we tend to look back on, and some people could describe it as the good old days, and it wasn't good for everyone, but it was good for a lot of people. The economy was booming, and the person who had the latest home gadgets, the newest car, the new expansion of to their house, to their pool, those things were taking the place of filling the void, filling that need of certainty within us that used to be filled by religious certainty. And so, in my opinion, it's okay to go out and purchase things. Sometimes if you want to purchase some things you don't need, I think all of us do it. We are living in a capitalist, mostly, I would say 75% capitalist society. And I think that's fine. I always talk. You go on my Instagram page, you'll see me and my wife at Disneyland like a lot. We have annual passes. Is that something that's necessary? Absolutely not. That's something we enjoy. Yes, but we also know that it's a privilege to be able to do those things. It's a privilege to be able to own a home in San Diego, which is very expensive, and we don't take those things for granted. Especially from our backgrounds. Neither one of us grew up rich. My wife was actually a refugee. So our success is something that we don't take lightly, and we also, if there's other people that we can help achieve their goals, that's one of the things that we try to do. So, but some people don't. Some people just purchase things or buy things, whether it's clothing, jewelry, cars, take trips, because they think that's an actual goal instead of a relief or just a timeout. And that's when it becomes unhealthy, because they're not fulfilling, I should say, in a spiritual sense, or even in a sense that's going to keep you feeling safe. True safety comes from knowing that you can accomplish. It's not anything that you can purchase. But at the same time, we don't want to be so far, and this is my opinion, onto the religious end, to where you give up your freedom to anything, especially if it gets to the point to where you're in like a cult-like environment, because there's a lot of people who will prey on that, and some religious leaders are one of them. And you want your goal setting to be something that comes from self-expression, not conformity. And because we're all unique and we're all different individuals, and if you don't fit in certain boxes, sometimes in certain religions, or even if you can look just like everyone and have the same income as everyone, I think that it's important. I think the individual is important. Let me just say that. I think the group is important, but the individuals within that group are what make the group strong. It's their bonds that sustain society, not the fact that we're just a group and everybody's thrown in there and through force. So I think the balance is somewhere in between those two things, this extreme, and I won't even just call it consumerism as Watts did. That's what he referred to it back in the 50s, because now it's become just superficiality in general. How many people, especially young people, get their quote unquote fix from social media? How many likes they have. You see girls and guys too, doing provocative things, just because they know that they'll get more likes. And the sad thing is, they're not even getting profits from it. I mean, it's from somebody who's an MBA. Like, I can understand. I mean, some of them are, but your typical, 17-year-old girl who's on Instagram and is dressing provocatively or whatever and has, let's say she has 10,000 followers. That's not paying for college. It's you're going to be popular. You're going to get a lot of DMs. You're going to get a lot of likes and a lot of that. But really, what's it going to do for you in the long run? And hopefully, it doesn't come back. And not that it should. And I don't want to say that cyberbullying or people should be judged as a person by what they put on social media. But I do want to say that. Just if you listen to my dating podcast, you are not the same person at 17 as you are even when you're 25. Definitely not the same person when you're 40. So I would think that we would like to guide young people through the mistakes that we've made, first of all, to help them make better decisions, but also to help remove some of that insecurity so they can go forward with goals that they may not have thought they were able to obtain. And when we talk about predatory practices, well, let's just look at the housing crisis. When the housing market crashed, why was that? Well, basically, in a nutshell, you have people who were buying homes that they couldn't afford, and they might have been able to afford them initially, and like a lender, at your local bank, they were just giving them away. And I'll tell you why in a second. But somebody who is making, let's say, $40,000 a year, buying a $600,000-$700,000 home. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, how are you going to make up those payments? Well, because they had adjustable rates. So, maybe the interest rate would be low and then readjust in 5 years, and that way their payment that they were making when they first purchased a home, when they first signed the paper, was doable, and then it readjusts, and you go from paying $1,100 a month to $3,500 a month. And I've never seen too many people get a pay raise that would be that significant. So you can imagine why there were so many defaults. But then the banks, would sell it to them. And why would somebody do that? Because you can't assume that everyone just doesn't know math or basic math or doesn't understand that, this is going to be more expensive down the road. It's because of that consumerist side of us that we want to have the appearance of success, and it makes us feel good. And if we're lacking, and I'm not saying that this applies to everybody who bought a home that they eventually couldn't afford. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But you got to say that somewhere in there, buying a really nice home feels good for everybody. And especially if you come from an environment where maybe you didn't live in such a nice home, Well, I could see why you wanted to do that. If you were married to somebody or about to marry somebody who's expecting you to be a provider, and maybe they're not even saying that. Maybe that's a pressure you're putting on yourself. Well, that's a good way to show the in-laws that, hey, you mean business, is to have like and I mean this is not a lot in the rest of the country, like in Wyoming, but if you have a 2,000 square foot place in San Diego, you got some money, So and people would take advantage of that. They know that there's people out there that would buy these places and say, hey, we'll just, as far as the adjustable rate, we'll figure it out. Hopefully we'll have better jobs by then. We might even flip the house by then or whatever. And I knew people who were in the real estate business back then, and that's the way they would talk. It's like, hey, like this thing was never going to end, and we all know all bubbles end. I mean, it's just basic. You don't even have to have a business degree to understand how things are cyclical, but and the banks didn't care either, because then they'd wrap those things up and they would sell it to a bigger bank, which would sell it to a bigger bank. And all these, would wrapped up and put into derivatives and sold on an exchange, and nobody could unwrap it. And it was and then there was some shenanigans with, taking these subprime mortgages and grading them as lower risk than they actually were. And then that eventually brought down, the entire economy in more than one nation. So, and a lot of that was based on the insecurity that people played on of potential home buyers. Because if you were realistic with somebody and they say, hey, this is what you can afford and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, maybe they don't get that $600,000 4-bedroom place, and maybe they get that 2-bedroom condo, and they'll chill, and they would still own it, and they wouldn't have had to abandon that place, and our economy would be in much better shape. So that's just one way. We do it in marketing all the time. We play on insecurities because most of the things that we purchase we don't need. So if I can tell you that this is going to make you more attractive, this car is going to make you more appealing to women, this line of clothing is just going to make you more want this lipstick, this makeup, this. That's all companies are doing to play on the insecurities that we all have. And I don't necessarily blame them for that. I mean, I have a podcast, and if you're listening to this podcast to feel better, to say, oh, wow, maybe this can help me with my insecurities, well, then I'm kind of playing to that too, right? Because this is an endeavor upon my part, and, and I hopefully that I'm not doing harm, but it is what it is. People who sell coffee, it's like, well, it's because you're not going to be able to wake up and do your job without it, And that doesn't mean that these people are evil. It doesn't mean that these companies are evil. What it means is that as individuals, we need to learn how to regulate our insecurities. And sometimes, where do these insecurities come from? Well, I think we're all born with that engine. But at the same time, there's things that inflame it. It could be past trauma. I like to say PAP. It's basically past events. Anxiety, which could be general anxiety, which is clinical, and personality. Some people are like perfectionists, and they're just going to constantly feel insecure because if they don't get something perfect, they don't want to move to the next level. I've seen people who, and it's a funny story, but the person who took over my last position that I vacated didn't apply initially and didn't feel they were able to do it at the time, and that person was probably better for that position than me. You know what I mean? And I was just like, I don't have that. I'll just go for it. And so you see that in the workplace all the time, and you sometimes see that divide between men and women, and that's actually been studied. Where if there's a job where you meet what we call in HR the MQs, right? If I can do half of those, as a man, I'm more likely to apply for it than a woman who will think, man, I can only do half of those. That's a failing grade. That's 50%. That's an F. A lot of women won't even submit the application. A lot of men will submit the application if they can't do any of it. Again, we go back to the difference between confidence and arrogance, but you see that a lot, and so that's how insecurities can hold us back, and so how do we get over? Well, we don't really get over insecurities, but how do we find that balance? Well, I think the first thing we need to do, and anybody who's been a part of any type of diversity and inclusion training or program, is that you need to identify your authentic self. And you need to know your authentic self. And when I say know your authentic self, I don't just mean, check off the characteristics that you have. I mean, really know yourself. Like if you are, let's just talk about me. I'm an African American man. I was a foster child as an infant. I got to own that. I made a joke during my talk today that, as a black man, when my wife and I are at restaurants, I tend to over tip because there's a stereotype that black people don't tip. So I don't want them to think that about me. So I over tip. So if it's 20%, I'm 25, 30% tipper, you know what I mean? And is it really necessary? I don't know, because I'm assuming that my server and the people in the restaurant or whoever else would see, my tab are thinking these things, and that's, shame on me for thinking that, because I'm not giving them enough credit, right? I'm sure they're happy with the tip, so it's fine, And I'm not one of those people who says, "Hey, if you're going out, it's a luxury, and if you can't afford to tip, don't." I don't really like the whole tipping philosophy, because I think we're subsidizing businesses that should really be paying their workers more. But that's a whole other tangent. But yes, that's an insecurity. But I'm aware of it, and I own it, and I know that could pop up in other areas. And so if it pops up in somewhere significant, like my wife, just initially asking her out, or a job promotion, or applying for a loan, or a home loan, or whatever. I don't let those things stop me. I just try to prepare as best I can. I take a little bit from the religious, people in my life, and I do leave it up, because once you do it, you can't look back, But before it's done, I try to prepare, and I might still have an insecurity, but it's not going to stop me from applying. It's not going to stop me from pulling the trigger on something that I think that I need to do. And when you get to know your authentic self, and when I say that, because there's lots of people out there, gay, straight, black, white, you could have past trauma, childhood trauma, or maybe you have a substance abuse issue. Once you know your authentic self, if that's part of you, don't approach that with shame. We always talk about, especially on this podcast, and please go back. Every time you listen to one of my podcasts, I always refer back to the one on empathy, because that's really the cornerstone of all of these. But you need to have empathy for yourself too. You need to have, not just other people. You need to be self-reflective and be able to cut yourself a break. You may have these issues, and yes, you need to work on some things, like we all do. But that shouldn't get in the way of goal setting. That shouldn't get in the way of you moving forward and doing what you want to do as a person. So knowing your authentic self will lead to understanding the motivations behind actions or inactions. And then once you say, oh, wow, the only reason I'm not doing this is because I'm afraid I will be rejected because I am this. Or the only reason I am doing this is because I want to overcompensate because I'm afraid that somebody will notice that I am this. Well, then you will understand that it is just an insecurity. It's in your head. Yeah, you might face prejudice, or you might face some discrimination in your life. But even then, that's more reason to push forward. That's more reason to overcome your insecurities. Not just for you, but for everyone else who's similar to you, and everybody who's not similar to you. Because you matter. And you may have something to offer this world. Well, I actually believe everyone has something to offer this world. But if we're talking about a particular position or a particular goal or something very specific in your life that you want to do or you think is necessary, I want you to be able to do that. And I want you to have the courage to do that, because because your success doesn't just benefit you, it benefits all of us. And a whole you will help at least half of me. I don't know if that's a saying. I just thought of that. But it does, You never know how your success will affect others, and even some people that you've never even met. So stay strong, know your authentic self, and, fight fear with progress. This is Brian Piepenbrink, and this has been Scaling the Well. Thank you.